Hello, everyone. Okay, today is actually the part 6 of David and Saul, and we'll be talking about looking beyond the heart. The Bible tells us that Satan put it in the heart of Judas to betray Jesus. That statement has always made me to think. It shows that the enemy is always looking for an opening. It looks for loopholes, vulnerabilities, weaknesses, or anything that he can use to strike, okay? And many times he doesn't attack us directly. He tries to reach us through the people closest to us. Not because they are all evil, but because we are most vulnerable with those we love. Okay, I'm not saying this to excuse anyone's actions. People are still responsible for their choices, okay? Before someone hurts you or betrays you, the thought comes first. The temptation comes first. They still have the choice to resist. Love and loyalty should outweigh the desire to compromise, okay? But understanding that there is sometimes a deeper battle happening beneath the surface helps us heal. It helps us realize that the real enemy is not always our spouse, our siblings, our friend, or our loved ones. The real enemy is the one who looks for weaknesses and try to use it to destroy relationships. Okay? Over the years, something that has helped me personally is learning to look beyond what someone did to me and ask why they did it. Not to justify it, okay? Not to pretend it didn't hurt, but to understand. Because sometimes people hurt others not simply because they want to, but because there are broken places in them they never healed. Places of trauma, places of weakness, patterns they grew up seeing, cycles they never learned to break. There's a saying, hurt people hurt people. And in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, it's true, okay? Some people repeat what they experienced. Some people act out of wounds they don't even fully understand themselves. Again, this doesn't excuse the behavior. Wrong is still wrong. Betrayal is still betrayal. But seeing someone's brokenness instead of seeing them only as an enemy softens the heart. It helps us fight the real battle without allowing bitterness to consume us. Because if we are not careful, the enemy doesn't just hurt us through others. He tries to turn us into bitter, hardened people afterward. So instead of fighting flesh and blood, I choose to guard my heart, pray, and take the fight to the real enemy. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness. Now, another thought that has been sitting deeply in my heart is the moment when Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." At first glance, that story may not seem related to forgiveness, betrayal, or being hurt, because Peter wasn't trying to harm Jesus. He wasn't betraying him. He wasn't acting out of hatred. He was speaking out of love, fear, and I believe attachment. Okay, Peter couldn't bear the thought of losing Jesus. So when Jesus began to talk about going to the cross and dying, Peter immediately resisted it. He said, in essence, "This must never happen to you." To Peter, it sounded like protection, but to Jesus, it was interference with God's will. I'm going somewhere because the cross was necessary, okay? It was part of the Father's plan for salvation. So when Jesus responded, "Get behind me, Satan," he wasn't calling Peter the devil. He wasn't rejecting Peter. He wasn't cutting him off. He was addressing the source behind the thought, okay? Jesus recognized that the enemy was trying to use Peter's fear and love to discourage him from the cross. Peter wasn't the enemy. Peter was simply vulnerable in that moment and the enemy tried to exploit that vulnerability. And that realization, okay, connects so strongly with everything we'll be talking about, because sometimes the people who hurt us are not acting out of pure hatred or evil intentions. Again, I'm not excusing people's wrong, okay? Sometimes they are acting out of fear, brokenness, wounds, weakness, or things they haven't healed from. And the enemy takes advantage of those weak places. If Jesus had misunderstood that moment, he could have pushed Peter away. He could have labeled him the problem. He could have said, "You are against me," but he didn't. And what's beautiful is this. Later, Jesus still washed Peter's feet. Later, Peter was still one of his closest disciples. Later, Peter became one of the pillars of the early church. Jesus knew who the real enemy was. And sometimes that is what we need to learn too. Sometimes we spend all our energy fighting people when the real battle isn't against them at all. The real enemy is the one manipulating wounds, fears, and weaknesses, which means sometimes our reaction to someone's offense can actually do more damage than the offense itself. If we lash out in anger, cut them off completely, or respond with bitterness, we may end up destroying something that could have been healed. That's why we need wisdom. Cases are different. Yes. There are things I don't want to share, okay? Sometimes I feel, okay, let me just leave this alone for myself. Because I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want to be misquoted. Again, I just feel that what I'm sharing may not be for everybody, may be for someone, okay? So, what I'm trying to say here now doesn't relate to all issues, okay? There are times when you need to cut people off. That's why I was saying we need wisdom, okay? We need God's leading. We need God's guidance. We need God's direction. And we need wisdom. Because not every hurt comes from hatred. Sometimes it comes from brokenness. Sometimes it comes from someone who loves you but is bleeding eternally. You know, someone who hasn't been healed, someone the enemy is taking advantage of. So instead of only reacting to what they did, we begin to ask a deeper question. Why did they do it? What wound is behind this behavior? What weakness is being exploited? Because when we understand that, it helps us respond with wisdom, not just emotions. It helps us fight the real enemy, not the person standing in front of us. This will help families a lot. This will help couples, siblings a lot. You know, this would help parents and children relationship, husband and wife relationship. You know, this would help families a lot. Learning to see who the real enemy is and taking the battle to him. Amen. And I'm still going to say this. See, people are responsible for their actions. Okay? But they are also shaped by their history. Because the truth is, people are not born monsters. See, no one simply wakes up one day and decides, I want to be evil. Most of the time, what we see on the surface is the result of years of shaping, years of pain, abuse, bad examples, broken homes, and dysfunctional environments, okay? People are formed by what they grow up seeing. They are shaped by what they experience. They are influenced by what was normalized around them. A child who grows up constantly witnessing violence, anger, or betrayal may begin to think that those things are normal. Because children don't just learn from what we say, they learn from what we do. Our actions teach louder than our words. So when that child grows up and repeats the same pattern, it doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it should be excused, but it shows that something shaped them long before we ever met them. Something shaped them long before we ever met them. We're coming from different backgrounds. We are coming from different homes. We are coming from different environments. I may have come from a family where I experienced love, where my parents knew the Lord. They trained me in the way of the Lord. They took me to church. They did Bible study with me. They counseled me. They correct me. They put me in an environment of godly friends. Whereas somebody else may be coming from someone else that I came across with who hurt me, may have been to 5, 10 different foster homes. He or she doesn't even know the parents. He or she may have been raped, molested. He or she may have joined bad gangs, joined even so many things may have happened to that person that I know nothing about. So it may be easy for me to start saying, you're a monster, you just want to hurt people, to hell with you. It may be easy for me to do that. Sometimes people hurt you not deliberately, but because it's an area of weakness. It's an area of brokenness and struggle in their life. Still, that doesn't excuse what they did, but it makes us to see differently. It makes us to act and react differently. So sometimes you don't react from a place of anger, you react from a place of compassion, because you know where this person is coming from. You know what this person has been through. So there is calmness. So you sit down to think and allow God to lead you to take the actions that are necessary. Many people who hurt others were once children who were hurt themselves. They grew up without guidance, without healthy love, like I said before, without good examples, without anyone showing them a better way, okay? And while they are still responsible for their choices, we must also recognize that not everything they do comes from pure malice. Not everything they do comes from pure malice. Sometimes it comes from weakness. Yes, I'm saying it again, weakness. Sometimes from brokenness. Sometimes from wounds they never healed. And understanding that has become for me one of the first steps towards healing, okay? Because when we only look at what someone did, anger comes easily. But when we begin to look at why they did it, when we hear their story, their background, what they've been through, something changes. Anger slowly turns into compassion. There were times someone hurt me deeply and I was upset. But when I began to learn about their past, which I just said, about what they have endured, about the pain they carried, I started seeing them differently. I realized this person wasn't always like this. Life shaped them into this, and that realization softened my heart. It didn't justify the hurt, okay, but it helped me understand, and understanding helps us heal. Lately, I have been watching this FBI series, and strangely, it has taught me something deeper than I expected. At the beginning of almost every episode, a crime is committed, something terrible happens, and naturally, your first reaction is anger, okay? You want justice, you want the criminal caught. Sometimes you even feel like if I was there, I would just shoot. I would just end the person. But as the episode goes on, the FBI starts digging into the person's life. They investigate the background. They ask questions. They uncover the story behind the crime. And many times, what they discover changes everything. You find out that the person didn't just wake up one day and decide to be evil. Many of them are repeating what they saw growing up. Some are acting out of the violence they witnessed as children. Some are carrying wounds from abuse. Some were neglected. Some were manipulated or brainwashed. Some grew up in the chaos and dysfunction and never learned a different way to live. And you start to realize this person wasn't born a monster. They were shaped by pain, shaped by trauma, shaped by broken environments. There were even moments in the show where the agents didn't immediately shoot the suspect, even when they could have. Instead, they talked them down. They spoke to them. They said things like, this is not who you are. This isn't who you were meant to be. We understand what happened to you. We understand the pain you've been through. And something incredible happens. The person starts breaking down, they start crying. Sometimes they drop their weapon and surrender. And watching that made me emotional. It made me to start thinking and start seeing life from a different perspective. It changed how I see people who hurt others and even people who have hurt me. You know, God is helping me to come to a place where I can't easily condemn people anymore. I can't quickly label someone as hopeless or evil. Amen. Because I realize that many of them are people the enemy has been ruining for years. People who grew up in dysfunction. People who were once loving, but life and pain twisted them into someone they were never meant to be. So instead of taking the battle to them, I go on my knees. I war for their soul, because the real enemy isn't the person. Yes. The real enemy is the one who destroyed their life and is not trying to use them to destroy others. And that's why the story of Stephen means so much to me. While he was being stoned to death, he didn't pray for judgment, okay? He prayed for mercy. And standing there was Saul, the very man who would later become Paul, one of the greatest apostles God ever used. If Stephen had chosen vengeance instead of mercy, imagine what might have been lost. That shows me something powerful. You never know who someone might become in God's hands. Sometimes I even wonder if God allows some people to cross our path, even hurt us, not so we can destroy them, but so we can minister to them and be part of their healing and restoration journey. Jesus said, we are the light of the world. And light only shines where there is darkness. Maybe sometimes God allows us to encounter wounded, hateful, or broken people so that we can show them something different. Love, kindness, mercy, grace, not retaliation or revenge, but restoration. That's what Jesus did on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even while we were yet sinners, the Bible says, Christ died for us. So if we have received that kind of love, how can we refuse to give it? Our love for others must reflect the love Christ showed us. A love that forgives, that is patient, that is kind, that keeps no record of wrongs, that blesses even those who persecute. So instead of choosing to hurt people back, I choose something else. I choose to pray, show mercy, and fight for their restoration. And I'm going to end with this. Lately I've found myself in tears, especially last night, because it feels like the Father is slowly showing me his heart. And the more I see his heart, the more undone I become. Because when I think about my own life, I can't even count how many times I have failed God, okay? I can't count how many times I have feared instead of trusted, how many times I have disobeyed and grieved him. And yet, he has never stopped loving me. He has never stopped showing me mercy. And then I remember what Jesus said, love one another just as I have loved you. And that makes me to pause and think. Because when I really think about the love of Jesus, truly think about it, it's overwhelming. The love of Jesus is not small. It is not selective. It is not conditional. It is the kind of love that looks at the worst sinner and still says, come home. Even a man who has committed terrible crimes, even a murderer, even someone sentenced to life imprisonment or death, if that person genuinely repents and cries out to God, Lord, forgive me, God forgives. God forgives. That, see, human justice may sentence someone, and rightfully so, okay? Actions have consequences. But even while justice runs its course, the mercy of God is still available. No one is too far gone. No one is too dirty. No one is too broken. No one is beyond redemption. I have seen stories where someone forgave the very person who killed their loved one, standing in a courtroom, looking the offender in the eyes and saying, I forgive you. And when I see things like that, something happens inside me. It feels like the love of God is consuming me. The desire for revenge starts losing its strength. The urge to fight back weakens. Bitterness begins to melt. Because when you truly encounter God's mercy towards you, it becomes harder to deny mercy to others. Yes, there are real hurts. Yes, there are betrayers. Yes, there are crimes that must face consequences. Okay? But even then, if you are a child of God, something in your heart still prays for them. Even if they go to prison, you still intercede. Even if justice is served, you still ask God to save their soul. Because you realize something powerful. No pit is too deep for God to reach. No life is too far gone for God to restore. No story is beyond redemption. God is so loving, so patient, so compassionate that the people we would give up on are still part of His salvation plan. And when I see that, it changes how I see everyone. It makes me want to choose mercy. It makes me want to love deeper. It makes me want to reflect the act of the Father. Because if God has been this merciful to me, how can I not be merciful to others? God bless you.